Britain drove the 60s revolution in popular culture. The young stars that led that revolution then changed traditional British values, paving the way for men to wear tights. Drug taking had become widespread. Sex was for fun, not for life. Young women got a chance to do all the boring jobs blokes wanted to keep for themselves. But 1968 saw a much more direct challenge to authority. The target was the war in Vietnam. The face of this challenge was one of Britain's brightest young stars, the actress Vanessa Redgrave. In 1966, she had put on her army fatigues to sing a Cuban revolutionary song at a happening in the Albert Hall. 2 years later, she talked to Braden about how this and her outspoken views were threatening to damage her Hollywood career.
Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
I didn't really think anything of it except the stupidity of reactions to the evening. Until later I happened to have interviews with various American film directors and film producers and people. And one by one they would talk to me and they would say, I could have slaughtered you when you did that. You know, it's fine to think what you believe in, but don't go, you know, sticking your neck out like that. You know, you end yourself up in trouble. And they all sort of gave me to understand that they agreed with me, but that I should shut up about it.
I was doing a lot of work in America and in England against the Vietnam War. More and more troops, surge after surge, were being sent up into Vietnam, and the loss of American life was enormous, as was the loss of Vietnamese life.
By '68, fighting in Vietnam was at its bloodiest. The communist North Vietnamese had launched their Tet Offensive. Deaths were rising. 30,000 US troops and 500,000 Vietnamese.
Vanessa did get into quite a bit of trouble around Vietnam, mainly for demonstrations. I remember her being in, I think it would have been As You Like It for the Royal Shakespeare Company, and going on a rally before a matinee where she could have been arrested, and my thinking, but you've got a matinee.
Vanessa led 10,000 protesters on the most famous anti-war demonstration in British post-war history.
Vanessa Redgrave, as usual, was in the vanguard of the would-be peacemaker.
I just thought, high time there was a march and a rally in the UK.
The demonstration turned into a riot when the march reached the American embassy in Grosvenor Square. 86 people were injured and over 200 arrested.
So, in Grosvenor Square, the last few fireworks thundered vainly against the phalanx of law and order.
So everything that happened in Britain against the Vietnam War was a follow-on to this enormous, inspired surge of American feeling against the war.
Before I did whatever I did because I wanted to do it, and I had never reflected on any consequence. Now it's there's a pressure for me to, from inside myself, to realize a consequence, and then I have to say, yes, but I still am going to do it.
The young protesters in Grosvenor Square couldn't stop the Vietnam War, which continued for another 7 years. Political power remained in the grasp of the older generation, but the 60s was the decade when Britain, when the young, seized control of pop culture for good, and Bernard Braden was there to capture it. So what happened next to his interviewees? By day, Dr. Sam Hutt lectures in sexual health care and set up a women's clinic in Transylvania. By night, he is Hank Wangford, country and western star touring and recording with his band, the Lost Cowboys.
When you think of how you plan life, and this is a very sort of hippie point of view, is life plans you.
For 4 decades, Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the world's greatest entertainers. He had a US #1 single in 1972 with Candyman and was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He died in 1990, aged 64. Drugs protester Caroline Coon became a renowned artist and photographer. In the 70s, she was a chronicler of punk and shot the cover for The Clash's White Riot. Her sexually explicit artwork has won her exhibitions at the Tate and Saatchi galleries.
I guess I would say to my younger self, thank you for fighting. And my younger self would say to me, carry on fighting.
Enoch Powell left the Conservative Party in 1974 in protest of Britain's membership of Europe and became an Ulster Unionist MP. Margaret Thatcher later adopted his free market economic philosophy. He died in 1998. Lynn Redgrave has enjoyed a great career on screen and stage, including 2 Oscar and 4 BAFTA nominations. In the States, she became famous as the face of Weight Watchers in the 80s. She received an OBE in 2001.
I didn't have a wild time because there was this, I think you can see from my interviews, this shyness about me and a sort of insecurity. But it was still so much fun to be part of the 60s. It was fabulous.
Despite her fears of being shut out by Hollywood, Vanessa Redgrave became one of the great film actresses. She's been nominated for an Oscar 6 times, winning in 1978 for the film Julia. Her stage work has earned her an Olivier Award. She remains an active campaigner, most recently opposing the War on Terror. She is thought to have declined a damehood.
I'm just glad that I set out to try and help. I'm not disillusioned. I just know an awful lot more, and I know a little better how to try and help. So that's what I do.
Anne Malalou became one of the country's leading criminal barristers. In 91, she was made a Labour life peer in the House of Lords. Baroness Malalou became president of the Countryside Alliance and led their opposition to the ban on fox hunting.
Life is extremely short. The difference between that film 40 years ago and today is as nothing. It happens in the blinking of an eye, and don't waste a moment of it. Have as much fun and as much pleasure as you can, and don't ever not do things because you feel too tired or too bored or too fed up. That time goes in a flash. It's a very short life.
That's all.